Hey, tonight's story isn't about a queen or a martyr. It's about something simpler, more dangerous. A face too beautiful, a body too perfect, and a village that didn't know what to do with either. No legends, no ballads. Just the dirt, the fear, and the smell of her skin in the dark. If dark history soothes you, or keeps you staring at the ceiling, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. What do you think is more dangerous, power or desire? Let's begin. If you're still watching, don't forget to subscribe and like. This story only gets darker. She called herself Aliette. Said nothing else? When asked where she came from, she said only, someplace without maps. The old priest took her for a vagrant. The butcher's son stared until his nose bled. The midwife muttered something about omens. But it was the widow Renly, stooped, sharp-eyed, with a face like dried parchment, who gave her shelter. Said she had a spare bed and a dead husband no longer using his seat at the table. The villagers whispered. Not just because of her beauty, though that would have been enough. It was unnatural. Not loud or flashy. Quiet. Like something in the woods watching you without blinking. Her hands never trembled. Her voice never rose. Her gaze never fell. Even when a drunk boy from the fields grabbed her wrist one night, Aliette looked at him, just looked, and he dropped to his knees and vomited in the dust. No one spoke of the baker's girl. The mother said she must have wandered off, maybe run to her cousins in Ledenham. But the girl's shoes were still by the door, and her favorite doll sat untouched on the windowsill. Aliette worked in Renly's garden, pulling weeds with bare fingers that never blistered. Sometimes she sang, low and lilting, not quite a tune, more like breath with intention. Crows gathered on the fence posts when she did. One of them dropped dead mid-call. By the second week, married men took the long path home to pass by the widow's gate. One even left wildflowers on the step. His wife found out. By morning he had fallen from the mill ladder and broken his neck. Accidental, they said. But no one looked Aliette in the eye for days after that. Then came the night of the storm. Thunder like splitting bones. Rain in sheets. And screaming, high, thin, unmistakable, from the woods beyond the chapel. It was the shepherd's boy. When they found him at dawn, he was naked, shaking, eyes wide and red from crying. She kissed me, he kept saying. She kissed me, and it burned. He wouldn't say who. But when someone offered Aliette's name, he screamed and threw himself into the well. Broke both legs and bit off part of his tongue. The widow Renly told no one what she saw that night, only that she wouldn't let Aliette sleep inside anymore. But Aliette never seemed angry. She took to sleeping in the hay shed, curled under an old blanket like it meant nothing to her. She doesn't feel cold, the widow whispered once to the priest. She doesn't feel anything. Still, the men kept coming. More careful now. More shamefaced. They said they were checking the gutters, delivering firewood, asking after the widow's health. They stared at Aliette like moths at a flame, knowing the burn, craving it anyway. And the women watched. They watched the way their husbands changed, quieter, jumpier, sometimes with scratches on their backs they couldn't explain. They watched the way their sons had trouble sleeping, muttering in dreams, waking hard and wet and afraid. The priest began preaching about modesty, about sin, about Jezebels who wear silk smiles and bring ruin to good men. He never used Aliette's name. But when he passed her in the lane, his knuckles turned white on his walking stick. One night, Aliette came to the chapel. No one knew why. She stood in the doorway, soaked to the skin, the veil gone. Her hair clung to her shoulders like ink on marble. She said nothing. Just watched. The priest fell to his knees. Wept. Screamed. Called her a demon, a tempter, the seed of Cain. And when he reached for the holy water, the bowl cracked in his hands. Not shattered, cracked, like it didn't want to be part of this anymore. She left without a word. Rain steamed where her feet touched the stone. The next morning, the priest was gone. No blood, no struggle, just gone. The chapel door stood open, swinging gently in the breeze. On the pulpit, A single white petal lay where his Bible should have been. And outside, by the widow's garden, Aliette knelt in the dirt, humming. On the third day after the priest's disappearance, 3 people arrived in the village. On horseback, in thick cloaks, with seals on gloves. They were not welcomed, they did not knock. They just appeared and stayed. One of them, the one with the grey streak in his hair and eyes like a whetstone, went into the headman's house. An hour later, the headman ordered Renly's widow to hand over the girl. "You can't hold her anymore," he said, looking past her. "On the orders of the governor." Renly didn't argue. She just stood in the doorway while Alyetta gathered up her few belongings, an old bedspread wrapped in a wooden comb, and a bundle with someone's name embroidered around the edge. She didn't say goodbye. She just nodded and followed the riders, barefoot, without looking back. They were not taken to the castle. First, in an estate near the forest, a place that the locals called the small residence. They didn't live there. They only hid it there. The rumors spread like mold. Someone whispered that she would become a concubine. Someone said that she would be given to the Inquisition. But those who had ever heard her singing in the garden did not believe it. Her shadow was too alive to be burned. In the house, she was kept in a room with latticed windows and a stone floor covered with a carpet on which lions were embroidered, torturing a deer. One of the guards tried to touch her when he was serving food. He went blind 2 days later. Without explanation. No wounds. On the 4th night, a man came into her. Not young. Thick hair, a clean-shaven face, a ring with a seal in the form of a snake biting its own tail. He didn't introduce himself. I just sat down, poured myself a glass of wine, and offered it to her. She refused. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Alyetta did not answer. I watched the wine swinging in the glass, dark as blood after the rain. He chuckled. "You'll find out soon enough. We've chosen the best we can offer you. You will become an ornament of the yard. But first..." He stood up and came closer. Alyetta didn't back down. He reached out his hand, not to her, but to her hair, touched a strand, as if checking if it was real. "Such skin," he whispered. "This kind of skin can change the fate of a kingdom," Alyetta said softly. "You sound like it's a commodity." He froze. For a split second, something flashed in his gaze, not anger, but rather excitement. "Sometimes beauty is power. It's just not yours." He left without touching her. But before the door closed, she heard a voice behind the wall. Female. Cold. "Let him play. Just don't hurt it." No one called her name, but the maids who brought the food and turned away when she looked, called the one who was hiding behind the doors. Lady Maeve. Queen. The wife of the one who just touched her hair. From that moment on, everything changed. She was no longer locked up, but the doors were guarded anyway. She was dressed in velvet, forced to sit at long tables with women who laughed too loudly and drank too fast. The men stopped looking into her eyes. The women have started. Sometimes, as she walked down the hallway, she felt her gaze being caught by another, through the gap between the curtains, between the fake mirrors. Someone was watching. Always. And at night he came again. At first, just to talk. Then ask questions. Strange. "How old are you? Where did you learn to sing? What do you dream about most often?" Alyetta wasn't lying. But she wasn't telling the truth either. It's too early. On the 7th night he came in drunk. And that changed everything. He came drunk on the 7th night. The guards didn't stop him. The maid at the end of the hall pretended not to see. His footsteps were loud, clumsy, uneven, a storm staggering toward her door. When he pushed it open, the latch cracked against the stone wall like a slap. Aliette didn't rise. She was seated by the fire, bare feet tucked beneath her, hair loose and dark against the pale of her throat. She didn't look surprised. Not even when he dropped into the chair across from her and spilled half the wine down his chest. "They think I'm mad," he said, voice thick with liquor and something darker. "My own court. My own wife." Still, she didn't answer. The flames licked the edges of his boots. He leaned forward, eyes glassy but hungry. They all watch you, you know. Pretend they don't, but they do. Even the priest I sent, he couldn't keep his prayers straight with you in the room. He laughed, bitter. He bled in the shape of a rose. Aliette's voice was quiet. You sent him? The man blinked. For a moment it looked like he didn't remember. Then the smile returned, crooked. He was testing you. We all were. But you already knew that, didn't you? She tilted her head slightly. And now? Now? He dragged his chair closer, wood scraping the floor. Now I'm tired of watching. He reached for her, not roughly, but like someone picking up a book they've long planned to read. His hand found her cheek, fingers cold and calloused. She didn't flinch. I could give you anything, he whispered. Rooms of gold. Lands. Horses. Men who'd slit their own throats just to be ignored by you. Aliette's lips curved barely. But you don't want to give. He paused. The fire popped between them. No, he said. I want to take. When he kissed her, it wasn't gentle. It wasn't violent either. It was something worse, calculated, slow, like a man measuring his own power. She didn't respond, didn't resist. Her stillness was sharper than struggle. His hand slid to her neck. I've seen you in my dreams, he murmured. Naked. Kneeling. Smiling. He pressed closer. Are you smiling now? Behind him, the door creaked. They both froze. Standing there, half in shadow, was the queen. She wore no crown. Just a high-necked gown of gray velvet, and a silver pin shaped like a dagger. Her hair was braided too tightly. Her lips were painted the color of bruises. She didn't look shocked. Or angry. She looked bored. The man stiffened. Maeve, he said, half rising. The queen raised a hand. Sit. He obeyed. Aliette didn't move. I see your taste hasn't improved, Maeve said coldly. Her eyes didn't leave Aliette. Do you think she's the first girl you've tried to break in that chair? The silence grew heavier. Maeve stepped into the room, shutting the door behind her with a quiet click. Leave us, she said to her husband. He hesitated. Then stood slowly, as if his bones had turned to iron. He didn't look at either of them as he walked out. The queen didn't watch him go. Only after the door closed did she speak again. He's not interesting when he drinks, Maeve said, walking to the fire. He says the same things to all of them. Promises he won't remember. Violence he thinks is romantic. Aliette's voice was barely audible. You let him. Of course, Maeve said. He has to think he's in control. It's the only way he functions. She knelt by the hearth, picking up the dropped goblet, wiping it clean with her sleeve. Then she looked at Aliette, truly looked, and for the first time, her expression changed. It wasn't envy. It was recognition. You're not what they think you are, Maeve said. Aliette didn't answer. You don't seduce, the queen murmured. You mirror. You reflect back what they want, until they can't tell the difference between you and their own hunger. Silence stretched between them. Somewhere outside, a horse screamed. Maeve rose. Smoothed her skirt. I'll keep you safe from him, she said. For now. But make no mistake. She stepped closer, her breath warm against Aliette's cheek. You belong to me now. They didn't move her from the manor. Not yet. But things changed. The room was cleaned. The curtains replaced. The food came on silver now, served by women with veiled faces and ringless hands. No guards outside the door. No locks. And yet, she never left. Because someone always watched. Not through windows or keyholes. Not anymore. The watching was in the silence after footsteps. In the way the walls didn't echo back. In the mirror that once showed her reflection but now just shimmered, like breath trapped beneath glass. Aliette didn't fear it. She had never feared being seen. But now, she began to feel studied, like parchment under a candle, slowly curling inward. Maeve came every third night. She never asked? she arrived. Always dressed differently, red velvet, morning black, hunter's green, but her voice was the same, low, precise, and never hurried. She spoke to Aliette like to a journal no one else would read. And she listened as if Aliette's silence was more valuable than answers. "Do you know why he picked you?" Maeve asked once, settling on the edge of the bed like a cat deciding whether to strike or sleep. "Because he thought you couldn't hurt him." Aliette looked up. "And you?" Maeve smiled, slow and sharp. "I hoped you would." The Queen never touched her. But she came closer each time. Not just physically. She spoke of her childhood, a tower with no door handle on the inside. Of her wedding night, a bloodless sheet, stained with crushed berries. Of her crown, which felt heavier the fewer people believed she wore it. Aliette listened. Until the night Maeve brought the box. It was made of blackwood, polished smooth, no clasp or lock. She set it on the floor between them without a word. Aliette waited. "Open it," Maeve said softly. Inside lay a necklace. No jewels. Just a thread of woven hair, not one color, but many. Black, blonde, gray, red. Dozens, maybe more. Twisted tight and bound at each end with bone. Aliette didn't touch it. "They were like you," Maeve said. "Beautiful. Desired. Dangerous in the wrong hands. What happened to them?" Maeve didn't answer. She reached into the box, lifted the necklace, and looped it once around her fingers. The hair didn't fray. It gleamed in the candlelight. "Wear this," she said, "and he'll never be able to enter you." Aliette raised an eyebrow. "You want to protect me now?" "I want to own what he tries to ruin." They sat in silence. Then Aliette reached out and took the necklace. It was cool, lighter than it looked. She held it to her neck. Maeve fastened it without asking. The hair prickled like static. And the next night, he came again. Sober this time. Dressed in formal black, a silver chain across his chest. He brought no wine, no words of seduction. Just a letter, sealed in red, stamped with the crest of a lion devouring a heart. "You're to be moved," he said, eyes cold. "Tomorrow. To the castle." Aliette didn't speak. He stepped closer. Stopped. Looked at her neck. His face changed. Something in him flinched. His hand twitched, just once, as if brushing away an unseen insect. "What is that?" he asked, voice low. "A gift," Aliette said. His lips thinned. "From her." She said nothing. He laughed, short and brittle. "Of course. Always meddling. Always pretending to save the ones I've already broken." He turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. "She's not your friend," he said. "Just remember that." After he was gone, Aliette undid the necklace and set it on the table. Watched it coil slowly, like something alive. She didn't sleep that night. Maeve didn't come. But the mirror, long empty, finally showed something. Not her face. Someone else's. A girl with ash blonde hair and bruises down her arms, wearing the same necklace. And she was screaming. She didn't scream. Not out loud. But inside the mirror, the girl was thrashing, her mouth open in a silent howl, her hands clawing at a door that didn't exist. The necklace glowed against her throat, a sharp line of hair pulling tighter with every second. Her eyes, wide, gray, wild, locked on Aliette like she knew she was being watched. Aliette stepped closer. The glass fogged. Just for a moment. Then the girl vanished. The reflection returned to normal, dull, still, clean. Aliette didn't move for a long time. She didn't tell Maeve. She didn't wear the necklace the next day. They came for her at dawn. 2 guards dressed in red. Not rude, but silent, the kind of silence that's practiced. They led her to a carriage without a crest. Its windows were curtained. The inside smelled like lavender and old sweat. The ride was long, the road rough. When they arrived, the sun was already low. Castle Whitefin wasn't white. It was gray and wet and taller than it had any right to be. Ivy crawled up its belly like veins on a corpse. The drawbridge didn't creak, It sighed, as if tired of lowering for people who never left again. No crowd waited. No trumpet. Just wind and wood smoke. Aliette was taken through side passages, up narrow stairs, past servants who didn't speak, didn't bow, didn't blink. Her new room was high, almost at the tower's top. It had no lock. Just thick walls and heavy air. She stayed by the window for hours, watching birds spiral toward the forest, then vanish. That night, she was summoned. Not to a throne room. To a bath. Marble floors. Brass fixtures. Steam rising from a sunken pool like breath from a sleeping beast. Servants waited with oils and cloths, their eyes lowered. And then Maeve appeared. No crown. No veil. Just a simple gown and bare feet. Her hair was undone, long, straight, the color of dusk. She didn't speak at first. She watched Aliette undress. Watched her lower herself into the water. Then she knelt at the edge of the bath, rolled her sleeves to the elbow, and reached in. Her fingers found Aliette's wrist. Not to grip. Just to feel. "You're colder than I imagined," Maeve said quietly. Aliette looked up. "And you're warmer." Maeve's hand lingered. "He asked me not to see you." "I'm sure he did." Maeve's smile was faint. "He thinks affection ruins my judgment. He forgets. I was raised on ice and etiquette. Nothing ruins me." She dipped a cloth into the water, wrung it out slowly, and began to wash Aliette's shoulders. There was no seduction in the motion. Just precision. Careful, exacting care, like polishing a weapon before battle. "You saw her," Maeve said. Aliette froze. "In the mirror," Maeve continued. "She comes to all of us eventually. Her name was Lisanne." Aliette said nothing. "She thought she was the last," Maeve said. "She wasn't." "Did you try to save her?" Aliette asked. Maeve didn't answer right away. She rinsed the cloth. Started again, lower now, collarbone, chest, stomach. "She ran," Maeve said. "And she failed. Some girls burn the world. Others burn alone." She stood. Water dripped from her sleeves. "I didn't bring you here to save you. I brought you here to see if you could last." Aliette rose from the bath, water sliding off her skin like silk. Maeve handed her a towel. "Tomorrow you'll dine with him. Wear something red." Aliette met her gaze. "Why red?" Maeve didn't smile. "Because that's the color he chokes on." The gown was silk. Dark red, the color of coals just before they go black. It clung to her hips, dipped low across her spine, and shimmered when she walked, not bright, but with the quiet thread of blood just under skin. No one helped her dress. No corset. No maids. When she stepped into the hall, a servant waited, thin, pale, faceless in that way only the well-trained could be. He bowed and led her without a word. The castle was quieter than it should have been. Too quiet. Tapestries lined the walls thick with dust. Candles burned low, their wax pooled like melted bones. She passed through 6 doorways, 3 archways, and 1 corridor that smelled faintly of milk and rot. Then they reached the dining room. Not the great hall, not the one meant for feasts and speeches. This one was narrower. Longer. Shadows stuck to the ceiling like spiders. At the far end, 1 table. 1 man. He didn't stand when she entered. Just poured wine into a single goblet, his. Aliette walked the length of the room slowly, her steps muffled by a rug older than the paintings. She said nothing. Neither did he. When she reached the table, she paused. He gestured. "Sit." She sat. The chair was too cold for the room, as if waiting only for her. He drank. Loudly. "You're late," he said. "I wasn't summoned," she replied. That drew a smile. "So now you wait for summons?" She didn't blink. "Only when it suits me." He chuckled. Poured more wine. This time, into a second goblet, hers. He slid it across the table. She didn't touch it. He leaned back. "I wonder what you think this is." "A performance," she said. He raised an eyebrow. And what role do you believe you play? Aliette tilted her head. The audience. The king. Because that's what he was, no matter how the rumors tried to soften him into something less. Watched her for a long time. Then he stood. Slowly, deliberately, he walked around the table. Came to stand behind her. His hand brushed her shoulder, then her neck. He traced the skin there lightly, as if searching for something. The necklace? He murmured. She told me not to wear it tonight. A beat. Then, did she tell you why? Aliette didn't move. No. He circled again, came to stand in front of her. Close now. His hand rested on the table, inches from hers. She's playing her own game, he said. She always is. I know. She'll turn on you. She already has. He stared at her then, truly stared, and something in his expression shifted. It wasn't hunger now. Or cruelty. It was confusion. Like he didn't know whether she was mocking him or meaning it. He reached out. This time, for her hair. But just as his fingers brushed the strands, a door opened behind them. Maeve entered. No gown tonight. Just black riding leathers, her gloves still dusty. Her hair in a knot, her eyes unreadable. Forgive the intrusion, she said coolly. But the steward informs me the eastern wing is flooding. The king didn't look at her. Maeve stepped further into the room. Her gaze slid to Aliette. Come, she said. You'll want to see this. It wasn't a question. Aliette stood. The king didn't try to stop her. As she passed him, he said, almost gently, almost like a prayer. She's not protecting you. She's collecting you. Aliette didn't answer. But when she followed Maeve out into the dark corridor, she realized something. Her hands were shaking. For the first time. Maeve didn't speak as they walked. The corridor they took wasn't one Aliette had seen before. Narrower. Less polished. The torches here burned lower, and the air tasted of damp stone and copper. They passed no guards. No servants. Just their own shadows, flickering on uneven walls. Eventually, Maeve stopped before a heavy oak door. She didn't knock. Inside was no eastern wing. No flooding. Just a room, circular, windowless, lit by a dozen slow-burning candles. In the center, a basin. Shallow. Stone. Filled not with water, but with a dark liquid that shimmered like oil. Maeve stepped aside. Look, she said. Aliette approached. The basin's surface rippled, though the air was still. When she leaned over it, the liquid cleared, not to reflect her face, but to show another place entirely. A girl. In a cell. Younger. Barefoot. Hair shorn unevenly, dressed in rags. Her mouth moved soundless. Her back was marked with welts, her hands trembling as she folded something. A piece of cloth, maybe a letter. Aliette frowned. Lisanne? No. The image shifted. Another girl. This one older, regal. Pale hair twisted into braids. Her eyes wide, frightened. A knife at her throat, held by someone unseen. Her lips whispered something. Shift. Another. Dark-skinned, draped in red silk, body suspended in the air as if by invisible threads. Her eyes rolled back. Her mouth foamed. Aliette pulled away. Maeve watched her. They were chosen, she said. Like you? Pulled from their villages. Touched by something none of us understand. Aliette's throat was dry. You did this? No. But I kept record. She circled the basin. Her steps were soft, almost reverent. Each of them was marked. Sometimes by beauty. Sometimes by rage. Sometimes by the way fire refused to burn them. Aliette's voice was low. And me? Maeve paused. You're different. That's not an answer. Maeve looked at her. It's the only one I trust. The basin shimmered again. For a moment it showed Aliette's room, her mirror, and the girl from before. Lisanne. She was weeping now. Her mouth formed a single word. Aliette. Then the liquid went black. Maeve stepped forward and touched the surface with 2 fingers. The basin stilled. "You're not the first to see her," Maeve said. "But you may be the last." Aliette turned. "Why show me this?" Maeve didn't blink. "Because if you don't understand what you are, he'll make sure you become what he wants." A pause. Then, "And because I want to see if you'll choose me." Aliette studied her. "You don't want allies," she said finally. "You want echoes." Maeve smiled, sad, slow. "Echoes don't betray." She walked to the door. "You have until the next full moon," Maeve said, her hand on the latch. "After that, everything changes." Aliette didn't ask what she meant. Because deep down, she already knew. The moon rose red that night. Aliette watched it from her tower, wrapped in a shawl too thin for warmth. The forest below swayed like a sea of dead hands. The castle was silent. Too silent. Like it was listening for something. She didn't sleep. When dawn came, she wasn't in her bed. She was at the mirror. The glass remained empty, just her face, pale and unsmiling. No lisan. No visions. But still, she watched. Waited. By midday, servants came. Wordless as always. They brought her a gown, bone white, with sleeves like folded wings. A belt of silver. A circlet made of thorns dipped in gold. She didn't ask why. Because she already knew. Tonight was ceremony. Not a coronation. Not a wedding. Something older. Something no one would name. She dressed without help. When they came to fetch her, she followed. Not through the main halls. They led her downward. Beneath the stone kitchens, beneath the wine cellars, into passages carved from rock that smelled of earth and age. The torches here burned green. After what felt like hours, they reached a door. Behind it, a chamber. Round. Echoing. Lined with statues too worn to recognize. The air buzzed, not with sound, but tension. Waiting. In the center stood the king. He wore no crown. Just black robes trimmed with dark fur, his eyes sunk deep in shadow. Around him stood 6 others, men and women, silent, faces masked in bone and cloth. Maeve wasn't among them. Aliette stepped forward. No one spoke. The king raised a blade. Not long. Not ornate. Simple. Old. The kind of blade that wasn't made to show, it was made to cut. He stepped closer. Aliette didn't flinch. He drew the blade across his palm. Blood welled. Thick, slow. He held it over a stone bowl. Let it fall. Then he offered her the knife. She took it. No words. No instructions. Just choice. She looked at her palm. Then at the king. Then, without hesitation, she pressed the blade to her arm. Not the wrist. The inside of the bicep. A deeper cut. One that would scar. Blood dripped. The bull accepted both offerings. The masked ones began to hum, low, dissonant. A sound that vibrated in the bones. The king took the bowl and poured its contents into a small trench that circled the chamber. The blood moved like it had purpose. When it completed the ring, the humming stopped. The king turned to her. "You're bound now," he said. "To this place. To me." Aliette met his gaze. "I was never free." He smiled. "You will be." Then he kissed her. Not roughly. Not gently. Just thoroughly. Like claiming something. Like sealing a deal. She let him. Because now, she understood. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about power. It was about history. About making something so deep, so tangled in shadow, that it would be whispered for centuries by mouths that never spoke their names. And behind it all, above the chamber, behind some wall or stone, she knew Maeve was watching. And smiling. She didn't see Maeve for 3 days. Not in the halls. Not at meals. Not in the chambers where women whispered behind silk fans and the air smelled like secrets soaked in perfume. The queen had vanished, and with her, the only presence in the castle that didn't feel like chains. Aliette wasn't summoned again. She walked the grounds freely now, or so it appeared. The guards pretended not to watch her. The servants bowed lower. Even the animals, the dogs, the horses, kept their distance, as if sensing something had shifted. Because it had. She felt it. The blood ritual hadn't taken something from her. It had given. She woke before dawn with heat crawling under her skin. Not fever. Not sickness. Something older. She dreamt of smoke curling into mouths, of teeth kissing bare necks, of her own voice echoing in languages she had never heard aloud. On the fourth day, she entered the library. Not the official one, not the room lined with useless chronicles and hollow glory. The other one. It was hidden behind a shelf in the armory, a room with no windows, no dust, and no light unless you brought it with you. Inside were books bound in flesh, in wax, in hair. Scrolls that smelled of the sea. Diaries that bled when opened. And names. Dozens. Hundreds. Not of kings. Not of lords. Of girls. She found Lisanne. Her name carved into the edge of a broken tablet, next to a symbol she didn't understand. She found her own name, too, written on a parchment that hadn't existed yesterday. She stared at it. Below her name, not a fate. Not a title. Just a blank space. Waiting. That night, she didn't return to her chamber. She went to the chapel. It was abandoned now. The altar was cracked. The holy text shredded. Candles melted into skulls. But something still breathed there. She sat in the pews for hours. Not praying. Listening. At midnight someone joined her. Not Maeve. Not the king. A boy. Maybe 13. Maybe less. His eyes were too big for his face, his clothes too fine. He sat beside her like they were old friends. "You don't smell like them," he said. Aliette turned. "Who are you?" "They call me heir," he said. "But I won't be king." "Why not?" He shrugged. "Because I'm not cruel enough." Silence. Then he looked at her, serious. "Do you know what she's doing, Maeve?" He nodded. "She's building something. In you. Around you. So that when it breaks, the pieces will all belong to her." Aliette exhaled. "And what about him?" The boy's face darkened. "He wants to be remembered. That's all. He doesn't care how. Even if it means carving his legacy into your bones." Aliette looked at the altar. "You talk like you're not part of this." "I'm not," he said simply. "I'm the mistake. They keep me fed, keep me quiet. But I hear the walls. And they hate her. Maeve?" He shook his head. "You." He stood then. Touched her hand once, soft, cold. "When the mirror cracks," he said, "don't look away." And then he was gone. Aliette sat in silence. And for the first time, she smiled. Not because she felt safe, but because the game had finally begun. The first raven arrived at dawn. It struck the high window of Aliette's chamber with a sound like bones cracking. When she opened the shutters, it lay there, wings broken, neck twisted, but eyes still wet with life. In its beak, a ribbon. Black. Sewn with gold thread. Not a message. A signal. She wrapped it around her wrist. The second raven came that afternoon. Alive. It landed on the balcony rail, silent, watching. Then it dropped a single object before flying off. A coin. No king's face. No crest. Just a spiral, etched deep. The same shape she had seen next to Lisanne's name in the Forbidden Archive. She hid the coin beneath her mattress. By dusk, the air felt strange. Thinner. Like it had been exhaled too fast and not replaced. The castle held its breath. At supper, the king spoke more than usual. He praised her grace. Her silence. Her beauty. But there was something in his tone, not pride. Not desire. Nervousness. He drank more than usual. Laughed at nothing. Told a story about a stag and a storm that made no sense, then forgot he had told it halfway through. Aliette watched. So did Maeve. The queen said nothing, but her fingers drummed on the table. Her gaze never left the goblet in her husband's hand. Later that night, Maeve came to Aliet's chamber. Uninvited. She shut the door behind her and leaned against it, eyes dark, cloak still wet with night air. "You felt it," she said. Aliet nodded. "They're coming," Maeve whispered. "Who?" "The ones who don't kneel. The ones who wait in the roots. They've heard your name now." Aliet stood. Crossed the room slowly. "And what do they want?" Maeve stepped closer. "To finish what began before either of us was born." She reached out, touched the ribbon on Aliet's wrist. "Do you know what this means?" "No." "It's not a warning," Maeve said. "It's an invitation." "To what?" Maeve's voice dropped. "To remember." Aliet pulled back. "I don't want to remember. I want to act." Maeve's eyes lit up, not with warmth, but hunger. "Good," she said. "Because the king means to marry you." Aliet blinked. "He never said." "He won't," Maeve cut in. "Not allowed. But the date is already chosen. The dress commissioned. The blood right was his courtship. He thinks you're his." Aliet's hands curled. "And you?" Maeve smiled. "I think he's about to lose everything." She stepped away, pulling something from her cloak. A key. Old iron, worn smooth at the teeth. She handed it to Aliet. "It opens the bell tower," Maeve said. "Be there tomorrow night. When the third raven comes." Aliet looked down at the key. Cold. Heavy. "I thought you didn't want allies," she said. Maeve turned toward the door. "I don't," she said. "But sometimes, to burn a kingdom, you need someone who still remembers what fire feels like." And then she was gone. Aliet stood alone, the key biting into her palm. Outside, the wind shifted. And somewhere far below the castle, in the forest that had once whispered her name, something opened its eyes. The bell tower hadn't rung in years. It leaned slightly, like it had grown tired of its own height. Ivy choked its lower stones. The door had no handle, only a rusted keyhole that refused strangers. But the key Maeve gave her turned with a sound like a throat clearing. Inside, dust hung in the air like memory. Aliet climbed in silence. Each step tighter, darker. Cobwebs clung to her dress. Something skittered past her boot, too fast to name. Near the top she paused. A door. Smaller than it should be. Sealed with a line of wax the color of old bone. Symbols burned into the wood. The air behind it hummed, not with magic, not with wind. With breath. She pressed her palm to the door. It opened. Inside, a room. Circular. Stone. One window blacked out. No furniture. No candlelight. Just a girl. Standing. Or rather, floating. Her feet hovered inches above the floor, her hair drifting around her like water. Her eyes were shut. Her hands hung limp. A circle of ash surrounded her body, unbroken. She wasn't dead. But she wasn't entirely alive. Aliet stepped forward. The girl twitched. Aliet stopped. Then, slowly, the girl's eyes opened. Black. No iris. No white. Just depth. Her mouth opened. A sound spilled out, not words. A shape. A feeling. A warning. Aliet stumbled back. The girl spoke again. This time it was language. "Yours." "Not her," the voice rasped. "Not the queen. Not the king. You." Aliet's chest tightened. "Who are you?" The girl didn't blink. The mirror. Cracked. Still watching. Aliet reached for her. "Lisan?" The girl tilted her head. "Not anymore." The ash circle flared, and then cracked. The room shuddered. A gust of wind burst from nowhere, slamming the door shut behind Aliet. The girl fell to the floor, but didn't collapse. She stood. Upright. Solid. Real. Aliet took a step back. "What are you?" she whispered. The girl smiled. Blood pooled in her mouth. What you'll become? And then she vanished. Not with sound. Not with light. Just gone. Aliette stood alone in the dark. But not untouched. Because now, her palm burned. The one she had cut during the ritual. She looked down. New lines etched into the skin. Not letters. Not runes. A map. Leading down. Not out. Down. Towards something buried long before thrones were carved or vows were broken. And behind her, from the shadow at the door, a voice whispered, "Now they'll come for you." The map on her palm didn't fade. By morning, it had darkened, lines of red ink that pulsed faintly with her heartbeat. She wrapped her hand in linen, but it bled through. As if the castle wanted her to follow it. As if it had waited long enough. Aliette didn't wait for summons. She dressed simply, no corset, no jewels. Just boots, a cloak, and the key still warm from last night. She left her chamber before sunrise. No guard stopped her. No eyes followed. But the silence had changed. It wasn't passive anymore. It was watching. She moved through the corridors like a ghost. Past the old well. Past the kitchens still unlit. Past the tapestry depicting a hunt, wolves tearing into a woman in red. Her own reflection caught in the blades of their teeth. The path from her palm led downward. Into halls no one remembered. Past doors that didn't open. Past walls that throbbed with heat and something thicker than air. She followed the turns instinctively. Left. Down. Left again. The mark guiding her like a whisper she couldn't unhear. Then she found the door. It wasn't hidden. Just forgotten. Rotten wood. Iron hinges. No symbols. No lock. Just breath, warm and steady, rising from beneath it like the exhale of something sleeping. She opened it. And stepped into blackness. Not absence. Wait. The kind of dark that drips. The staircase wound down like a spine. She walked for minutes. Then hours. Then longer. Time folded in on itself. Her breath grew shallow. The stone grew wet. Her hands trembled, but her feet did not. At the bottom, a chamber. Circular. Again. But older than the others. The floor was a mosaic, cracked, stained, but unmistakable. A woman. Beautiful. Naked. Kneeling. Her hands held out in offering. Her eyes sewn shut. Above her, not a god. A man. Crowned. Smiling. His hands around her throat. And beneath their feet, roots. Coiling. Writhing. Wrapping them both. Alive. Aliette stepped onto the mosaic. It groaned. And then, something behind her moved. Not a person. A mechanism. A part of the wall split. Dust choked the air. A second chamber revealed itself, narrower. Lined with glass. Inside each panel, a girl. Not real. Not alive. Preserved. Like museum specimens. Some wore crowns. Some rags. Some nothing at all. Each one looked like her. Not identical. But close enough. At the end of the corridor stood a pedestal. Upon it, a mirror. Cracked. Aliette approached. Her reflection shimmered. Split. And the girl from the tower stood beside her once more. But now she smiled. Aliette touched the glass. It rippled. And then a voice, not from behind, not from within, but from above, filled the chamber. "She's awake!" Aliette turned. A figure stepped from the dark. Tall. Thin. Veiled. Not Maeve. Not the king. Someone else. Older. "You've come far," it rasped. "But further still to fall." Aliette didn't step back. She stepped forward. Because for the first time, the fear wasn't hers. It belonged to them. The figure didn't move. Its veil hung like a second skin, edges frayed with age. Beneath it, nothing clear, just the outline of bone where a face might have been, and hands too long to be merely old. It didn't breathe. But the air moved around it. Aliette spoke first. Who are you? A pause. Then, caretaker. Of what? Memory. It stepped aside, gesturing toward the corridor of glass coffins. These are not failures, it said. They are records. Offerings. Anchors. Aliette stared at the preserved faces, frozen in sleep, in pain, in stillness. All of them familiar. All of them echoing something inside her. Why me? The figure's voice crackled. Because you arrived. And because you haven't left. Aliette's throat tightened. Did Maeve know? A second voice answered, behind her. She knew. Aliette turned. Maeve stood at the threshold. No gown. No armor. Just shadow clinging to her like regret. Her eyes were tired. Not weak. Old. I told you, she said. They're all echoes. But I didn't say what they echo. Aliette stepped toward her. What am I? Maeve didn't flinch. You're what happens when memory survives. The caretaker lifted one hand. The glass panels glowed. Each girl inside flickered, like images on a turning wheel. Some screamed. Some prayed. One laughed, endlessly. Aliette stepped between them. Each one whispered to her, names, fragments, smells of smoke, rosemary, snow. Lisanne's coffin was last. But it was empty. Maeve joined her. She broke the cycle, the queen said softly. But not enough to end it. And I can? No, said the caretaker. Yes, said Maeve. They stared at each other. Aliette stepped between them. What do you want from me? The caretaker lowered its veil. No face. Just shadow. To be remembered. Maeve spoke next. To be remade. Aliette looked at the mirror again. Her reflection split. One part of her stepped forward, the version who had knelt to the king. Another, the version who had bled for no one. And a third, the one who had yet to choose. Aliette lifted her hand. The map on her palm burned. The mirror shattered. But not outward. Inward. As if drawing everything into it, voices, names, rooms, blood, screams. The glass fell away. And in its place, a staircase. Not down. Up. Carved in stone. Lit from within. The caretaker bowed. Maeve looked away. Aliette stepped forward. And climbed. Because some stories aren't burned. They're buried. Waiting to rise again. The staircase didn't end. Not where it should have. It climbed through stone, through breathless heat, through air that pulsed with whispers she didn't recognize, but understood. Words she had never been taught, yet had always known. Each step was harder. Not for her body. For her name. She could feel it loosening, the shape of Aliette unspooling inside her, syllables slipping from meaning into instinct. She gripped the railing once, and it was warm. Like skin. Like breath. Then, suddenly, light. Not sun. Not fire. A kind of illumination that didn't come from above, but from all directions at once. She emerged into a chamber. Circular again. But this one was alive. The walls pulsed with veins of light. The ceiling stretched high and vanished into gold smoke. At the center, a stone table, no throne, no altar, just stone, and upon it, a single object. A crown. Unlike any she'd seen. Not gold. Not metal. It was made of hair. Skin. Bone. Woven together in a spiral that mirrored the coin she still carried. She stepped closer. And felt them arrive. Not with footsteps. Not with sound. With weight. Figures surrounded the edge of the room. Cloaked. Faceless. More than she could count. The same veiled ones. The same long hands. The caretakers. But now they bowed. To her. She didn't speak. Didn't kneel. Just looked at the crown. It pulsed. Alive. And she heard it. Not in her ears, inside her bones. A question. Not in words. But clear. Will you rule? Behind her, another presence. Familiar. Maeve. But different. She stood taller. Her hair now white, like ash after flame. Her eyes rimmed in red. You were never meant to last this long, she said. Aliette didn't turn. But I did. Maeve stepped forward. That crown doesn't give power. It remembers it. It roots you to every woman who wore it. Every one who was taken. Bent. Broken. Aliette's voice was calm. And you want it? No, Maeve said. I want you to want it. A pause. Then, because if you do, he loses. Aliette turned now. You think I care about beating him? Maeve blinked, almost startled. And then she smiled. Small. Sad. You really don't? Aliette looked back at the crown. It no longer pulsed. It waited. She reached out. Touched it. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold. It was exact. The room vanished. For a moment, no ground, no breath, no time. Only memory. Not hers. 100 bodies. 1,000 voices. All of them inside her now. Not screaming. Whispering. Telling her what they saw. What they suffered. What they learned. And what they chose not to forget. She opened her eyes. She was still standing. The crown in her hand. The caretakers knelt. Maeve lowered her head. And Aliette spoke. For the first time, not with a voice. With a command. Bring him. They brought him in chains. Not the king from the feasts. Not the lover. Not the predator wrapped in silk and wine. This was the man behind the mask, smaller than memory, paler than legend. His crown had been removed. His hands bound in black iron, etched with the same spiral that marked the dead girl's glass. He didn't look at Aliette. He looked at the crown in her hands. You don't know what that is, he said, voice steady, not begging, not proud, just rehearsed. Aliette stepped forward. I know what you made it from. A flicker in his throat. He tried to straighten. This isn't a throne. It's a cage. You wear it, and they own you. She stopped just beyond his reach. They already did, she said. Now they serve. The caretakers stood in a circle around them, silent, unmoving. Maeve stood behind him. Not touching. Watching. Why? Aliette asked, voice low. Why them? He shrugged, almost gently. Because no one remembers the pretty ones. The soft ones. They don't build statues for beauty. Only power. And so you buried them? I preserved them, he said, with quiet conviction. The world eats women like them. I kept them. Perfect. Eternal. Aliette stared at him. Then held up the crown. His eyes changed. Not fear. Grief. You're not the first to think you can hold it and stay yourself, he whispered. And you're not the first to think legacy excuses ruin. She lifted the crown. He closed his eyes. But she didn't place it on her own head. She stepped past him. To Maeve. And held it out. Maeve looked stunned. Then wary. You know what you're offering, she said quietly. I'm not offering, Aliette replied. I'm returning it. Maeve's hands shook as she accepted the crown. She didn't put it on either. Just held it. And for a long moment, silence. Then, behind them, the sound of something cracking. Stone. The floor beneath the king fractured. Lines raced outward like lightning. He looked down, just in time to see roots surge upward, like veins finally called to the surface. They wrapped his legs. His arms. His throat. He gasped, not choking, not screaming. Just remembering. One by one, the glass coffins lit from within. The women inside no longer asleep. Not quite awake. Just watching. Aliette turned. You said you preserved them, she said to him. Now they preserve you. The roots dragged him downward. Into the floor. Into the dark. No blood. No struggle. Just silence. And when he was gone, The light changed. Not brighter. Clearer. The chamber began to crumble, not in collapse, but in release, stones unbinding from lies, roots retreating into truth. The caretakers bowed lower. Maeve looked up at Aliette. "I was wrong," she said softly. "You're not an echo." Aliette stepped beside her. "No," she said. "I'm the end of the line." The castle didn't fall. It unfolded. Stone peeled back like bark, revealing layers beneath, halls that hadn't existed, corridors built from bone and song. Servants vanished. Guards dropped their swords and wandered, dazed, into the forest. No one sounded the bell. No one dared. Aliette walked through the ruins barefoot. Her steps left no mark. The air was clean now, not empty, but stripped of pretense. The kind of silence you find after the storm has drowned every name it didn't need. Maeve remained behind. She stood in the chamber that used to be a throne room, the crown still in her hands. Aliette didn't speak to her again. There was nothing left between them but memory, and neither woman had room for more of that. Instead, Aliette walked east, past the garden where the women once wept and the walls never listened, past the chapel where the priest once cried for mercy he'd never given others, past the mill where boys had broken their necks for glancing too long, and through the forest. It didn't stop her. The trees bent back. The roots parted. Animals watched, but did not run. She found the edge. Of land. Of legend. Where the cliffs dropped into black water. There she knelt. Not in worship. In arrival. From her pocket she drew the coin. The spiral still pulsed faintly. She tossed it into the sea. Not to curse. To close. Behind her, the earth shifted. She didn't look back. Because what needed to die had already done so. And what would live from now on, would live by her leave. When she stood, her dress was torn, her hair unbound, her palms lined with names. No crown. No scepter. But every bird on the cliffs rose when she opened her eyes. And somewhere far beneath the ocean, something ancient breathed for the first time in centuries. Not a monster. Not a queen. Just a girl. Unburied. And finally, unwritten. She returned to the tower she never claimed. Not to hide. To wait. The castle below no longer breathed like it used to. Its lungs were gone. The men. The feast. The thrones. What remained was quiet, not peace, but aftermath. Maeve came at dusk. No guards. No crown. Just her and the long shadow she dragged behind her like a tired story. Aliette stood at the window. "You didn't leave," she said. Maeve didn't answer. She crossed the room slowly, stopped a few paces behind her. "You were never meant to stay here." Aliette turned. "You said that already? I thought it was truth. And now?" Maeve's eyes moved to the mark on Aliette's hand, the map, now faded to scar. "You are the house," she said quietly. "Not the guest." Aliette didn't blink. "And what are you?" Maeve's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Not quite sorrow. "I was the door." Aliette crossed the room to her. "Close. Too close. You used me." "Yes." "You fed him girls for years." "Yes." "You watched me break the chain." Maeve looked her in the eyes. "Yes." Aliette's hand lifted. Not to strike. To touch the place where Maeve's throat pulsed, faint and stubborn. "And now?" she whispered. Maeve exhaled. "Now I ask you for something I never gave." Aliette's voice sharpened. "Obedience?" "No," Maeve said. "Forgiveness." Silence. Then, Aliette stepped back. Not out of fear. Out of choice. Maeve stood alone again. "You think it's over," the Queen said softly. "You think you buried the root. But this was just a castle." "I know," Aliette said. Maeve tilted her head. "You want to leave?" "No." "Then what?" Aliette looked past her, through the stone, the land, the bones beneath the mountain. "I want to dig." Maeve's lips parted. But before she could answer, the wind howled. Not through the window, through the floor. It rattled the stones. It dimmed the lamps. It peeled the symbols off the walls as if they'd overstayed their welcome. A voice followed. Not male. Not female. Just deep. Old. You broke the spine, it said. Aliette stepped toward the center of the room. I was meant to. No, the voice said. You were meant to bleed. The tower shook. Maeve stumbled. Caught herself. It's too early. You haven't. Aliette's hair lifted in the wind, her skin glowing from within. I haven't finished, she said. But I started. And that, she knew, was worse than any ending. The stones beneath her feet shifted. Not cracked. Breathed. The room pulsed once, twice, and then split. Not shattered. Unzipped. Like skin under a blade. Aliette didn't flinch. She stepped forward, bare feet meeting the raw earth below. Heat rose. Not fire, friction. Something beneath had begun to move, and the castle above it no longer mattered. Maeve called after her. You don't know what's down there. Aliette didn't stop. I don't care. She descended without torch, without guide. The passage was carved through flesh and time, not stone, not soil. The walls weren't cold. They twitched. The spiral on her palm glowed again. Not in pain. In recognition. The stairwell turned from black to red. Not light. Pulse. And then. Floor. A basin. Another one. But not for blood. This one steamed. Not with heat. With memory. She stepped to its edge. Inside it, visions. Not shadows. Not metaphors. Bodies. 1,000 women kneeling. Faces blank. Mouths sewn. Behind them, something enormous. Not beast, not man. Shape. Crowned with bone. It turned. It saw her. And it smiled. Not with teeth. With understanding. Aliette didn't run. She reached into the basin. Her hand submerged. The vision didn't pull her in. She pulled it out. And suddenly, she wasn't in the chamber. She was in the field. The one from her first home. Sun above. Soil underfoot. Her hands dirty. Her name, not Aliette. Someone calling it from a distance, soft and unafraid. Then the wind turned. The sun peeled back. And she remembered. The woman in the red dress. The touch that never left a bruise but always left a mark. The priest. The offer. The hunger. And the seed. They planted something inside her before she was old enough to name it. And now it had grown. The field fell away. She was back. Basement. Roots. Heat. But now her eyes were different. She saw them. The sleeping ones. Not in coffins. In walls. In water. In every room she'd walked through and called haunted. They weren't ghosts. They were anchors. Holding the door shut. And now? Now it opened. Behind her, Maeve descended. Saw the basin. Saw her. No, the queen said, shaking her head. You can't bring it up here. You bring it up, and the sky goes with it. Aliette turned. Calm. Empty. Ready. It's already here, she said. Because it wasn't her anymore. It was all of them. The door didn't open like a gate. It exhaled. The ground above trembled, not shattered, not cracked, just loosened, like something finally given permission to rot. Aliette stood still as the basin boiled. Not water. Not blood. But every memory they tried to dissolve. Faces emerged. Not in vision. In form. The first was the girl from the mill. The one who'd kissed the wrong boy. The one who disappeared. Her throat glistened with old rope. Her eyes were clear. Then the one from the chapel. Then the one from the tower. One by one, they stepped from the basin, barefoot and voiceless. And then, one spoke. Not aloud. Into the air itself. We remember. Maeve fell to her knees. Not in submission. In grief. "You're not them," she whispered. "You're what's left of them." Aliet walked to her. "You tried to survive," she said. "You built this place to trap the noise. The stories. The screams." Maeve's voice shook. "I built it to contain the hunger." Aliet touched her shoulder. "You failed." And above them, the castle began to weep. Not metaphor. The walls bled. The windows screamed. And from every crack in every chamber, black liquid poured, thick, slow, unstoppable. Memory liquefied. Truth undone. Aliet raised her hand. The spiral burned through the cloth, through her skin, through the shape of her. And the crown appeared. Not in her hands. Above her. Floating. Waiting. The women stood around her now. Not ghosts. Not soldiers. Roots. Mothers. Wounds. Aliet didn't ask for their power. She didn't need it. She was what came after power. She looked at Maeve. "You once asked if I would choose you?" Maeve nodded. Aliet leaned close. "I choose no one." And then she stepped back. Into the basin. The liquid rose to her chest. Her throat. Her eyes. And then, stillness. Above ground, the castle collapsed, not into ruin. Into silence. Below, the basin turned clear. Aliet stood at its center. Crowned. Not as queen. Not as martyr. As reckoning. The world did not end. It remembered. And when it did, everything that had been hidden, the bones, the bargains, the beauty too sharp to worship, came crawling into the open. Aliet rose from the basin. Not soaked. Transformed. Her skin bore no scars now. Just lines. Inscribed like scripture. Etched with the names of every girl who had vanished into story. They stood behind her still. But now they were not women. Not victims. Not echoes. They were soil. And she was root. Above ground, nothing remained of the castle but dust, and dust that sang. Villagers who had forgotten began to remember. The baker's daughter returned in dreams, her shoes still dry. The millboy spoke again, but only in song. In far cities, bells rang unstruck. Not mourning. Warning. Because something new had entered the earth. Not a god. Not a demon. Not even justice. Just wait. Truth that couldn't be buried anymore. Maeve did not die. She wandered. Cloakless. Crownless. Following rivers until even they refused to reflect her. Some say she lives still, at the edge of the saltwood, listening for voices that no longer speak her name. Aliet did not speak again. There was no need. She walked. Through fields. Through forests. Through churches that split at her steps and whispered her path to the worms. And where she walked, things changed. Not overnight. Not gently. But permanently. No girl vanished without trace again. Not because men stopped trying. Because the ground started remembering. And when they dug, it bled. No one built a statue for her. No one wrote her name in books. But in places where women gather with eyes sharp and hands still, there's always a seat left empty. Not for mourning. For arrival. Because some stories don't end. They settle. And wait.